Live from Boston, Massachusetts in the United States is terrorist expert Max Abrahms with us on the line. How are you, Max?
Good. Happy to be with you.
Okay, thank you for being with us. Max, as President Obama just said, well, the Islamic State is saying it will retaliate against the United States. He is saying he is vowing to continue in helping the people on the ground in Iraq in order to retake the parts that have been taken over by ISIS. And in an online video, they have threatened to retaliate against the United States. So what do you think?
Well, I think the most significant aspect of Obama's speech last night is that this is basically an open-ended commitment. There's no, finish line for when the United States will stop its involvement. Indeed, it looks really just the opposite, that the United States is increasing its involvement by using attacks from the sky, as well as providing weapons to the Kurds. And it appears that this 1-2 punch, really, of U.S. support, U.S. military support, as well as Kurdish/Iraqi security forces fighting, is in fact an effective reply to ISIS.
Right. It's an effective reply to ISIS in Iraq right now. But ISIS, as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, it's making headlines all over the world. UK Prime Minister David Cameron a few days ago was saying that if it is not contained, it could get to, it's getting to the English borders. People are talking about it in Lebanon, in Syria. They're all over the place.
Sure.
So, and I just got news today from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. They just came out with a report that said that over 1,000 of the new recruits in Syria are foreign and the rest Syrian, and they're all joining ISIS. So what does this mean for the region?
Well, it's scary because, militant groups use violence to a large extent as a communications strategy to say, look how strong we are. Look how militarily capable we are. And so because ISIS has been so successful at killing so many people, it indicates that it's a strong group, and therefore other groups are joining up with ISIS, making it a bigger and bigger threat. From the West perspective, particularly the United States perspective, the big question these days, of course, is whether ISIS is mainly a regional threat. ISIS is obviously a huge threat in Iraq, in Syria, probably Jordan, maybe even Lebanon, maybe even Israel. But does it have the same international aims as, say, Al-Qaeda? And I think that more and more there is a sense that ISIS does have those international aims, in part because it's comprised of so many Westerners who have passports which would enable them to return to Europe or return to the United States, plus the fact that their rhetoric is becoming more and more anti-America, particularly since August 8th, when the United States began military operations against the group.
Okay, right. So you're saying, right, so it's very similar to Al-Qaeda. It has an anti-American, it has an a lot of things kind of rhetoric, as you were saying. But my question is, now they're talking about containing it, as you were saying. It's a Middle Eastern threat for sure, but it is also becoming a global threat. And how do you combat such a group? Because, as you said, it's not just Arab people. There are nationals from all over the world that are going to combat on Middle Eastern ground and eventually do come back to their countries. So is there a solution?
Well, counterinsurgency from the standpoint of government forces is always extremely difficult. But it's particularly difficult when counterinsurgency is waged remotely, say from Washington, D.C. And I don't think that anybody has any illusions that the United States can, completely take out ISIS. And that's why you'll notice that Obama's language is much more modest than his predecessors. Whereas his predecessor, Bush, talked about defeating all terrorists, winning the war on terrorism. Obama is talking more about containment. And to a large extent, that's a function not just of the lessons learned in Iraq since 2003, as well as in Afghanistan. But it also has to do with the American public's view in terms of how much it wants to invest in a military campaign in the Muslim world. And I think that the United States is much more isolationist today than it was in 2003. And although there's widespread support for what Obama is trying to do, the nature of that support is rather shallow. And I think that Obama really cannot dramatically escalate attacks against ISIS because the American public won't stand for it.
I just want to end very quickly, in less than a minute, if you can answer me this. You're a terrorist expert. How does ISIS compare to other terrorist groups?
There has never been a terrorist group like ISIS before in the world. This is the richest group in terms of its money. It robs banks, it kidnaps, it sells oil. This is the strongest group probably in terms of its weaponry. Furthermore, this is a self-reliant group that doesn't depend on donations. It operates more like a proto-state. So in that sense, its capabilities are much, much bigger. That said, we haven't seen ISIS commit a mass casualty attack like a 9/11. And so the level of its skills in terms of its sophistication with bomb-making equipment may not be quite at the same level as Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is really known for that.